With concern that jobs will go despite Newcastle's support for Telstra, a planned meeting between the Lord Mayor and the communications giant is best described as an on-again, off-again affair. Now the Lord Mayor is going straight to the top of the Telstra corporate tree.
I understand some jobs have been lost already, and it would seem there could be more. I'm writing today to the chairman of the board, Mr Mansfield, asking for an interview with him.
He believes Telstra has obligations to the Hunter after the deal negotiated for its Newcastle office.
That facility was contributed to by the ratepayers of Newcastle. I know the detail of that, I know the background to it because I was on council when all that happened. Now, I don't think there's any need to go into the detail of that at this time, but if I have to in the future, I will.
John Tate accepts that Telstra has a business to run and may have to make cuts, but he is concerned about the Hunter.
We don't want to see our region penalised because of that, and we're prepared to shoulder the load if that's what's necessary, but by the same token, we're not going to be disadvantaged.
Remediation work and the creation of infrastructure is almost complete. It brings to a close $16 million worth of work designed to kick-start development at the eco-industrial park.
The proposals currently under negotiation will bring approximately 600 jobs to the region, and those jobs will be in industrial-based businesses.
While plans for a specialist steel mill in the Hunter are being fast-tracked, Steel River may miss out on that development. One of the companies behind the proposal says it's expanding and is now looking at other options in the region that may be able to better accommodate its size. A decision is expected in the next 6 weeks, but BHP says even if the mill is built elsewhere, Steel River has a bright future. It says 9 proposals are being negotiated and serious inquiries are being made into a further 12 opportunities, and it's hoping to confirm the presence of the CSIRO in the next couple of days.
The Parliamentary Works Committee have just tabled a report in Parliament, and that report will make a recommendation about the CSIRO locating to Steel River.
Brooke Webster, NBN News.
But it's really good for the children who are maybe not that keen on team sports, but it gives them a chance to work towards their own goals.
He may have been in the music industry for more than 30 years, but John English isn't about to rest on his laurels just yet. Instead, he's written a brand new musical that will make its worldwide debut tomorrow night in Newcastle.
Because I just live down the road and the crew all come from here. It's a lovely theatre and it's a good rock and roll town, Newcastle. Plus they give people a fair go, which is what I like.
Buskers and Angels is the story of a busker played by John English, who meets and takes under his wing a talented female singer.
She gets discovered and made over, imaged, taken away and discified, if you like, and it's her journey as seen through his eyes.
John has drawn on his own experience in the often fickle music industry when writing the piece, which took him some time due to his busy schedule.
From concept to now is about 10 years, but that's not working on it all the time.
Buskers and Angels runs until the 21st of October at the Civic Theatre before touring Australia's capital cities. Tanya Carlisle, NBN News.
The Mile Lakes may currently look a picture of health, but nutrient problems still lurk beneath the surface, causing concern for locals about not only the future of the waterway, but also towns surrounding the lakes. The Blue-Green Algae Action Committee fears another summer of toxic blooms.
If people are sort of deterred from this area for one holiday season, well, it's ongoing, that they may not come back ever.
The National Parks and Wildlife Service says it's attacking the problem from different angles, starting with research and water quality monitoring to determine the exact cause of the outbreaks.
Second one is a community-driven catchment plan to work through catchment issues across the lake as a whole. And I suppose thirdly, we're focusing on cleaning up our own act.
It will spend more than $1 million over the next 18 months replacing toilet systems in the park. And while the work itself has the support of the Algae Committee, it wants a more immediate solution. It's calling for action before the end of the year.
We want those toilets to be taken out of action now, nailed up, and portable toilets put in place.
Brooke Webster, NBN News. Sand mining stopped in this area when falling mineral prices and a strong Australian dollar made operating uneconomical last April. But a turnaround means it's back to business in 6 to 8 weeks' time when Mineral Deposits' Fullerton Cove site runs out of sand.
We did an in-depth study up here, and with some modifications to operating procedures and the current state of the Australian dollar, this operation is now viable once more.
More efficient procedures and a $1 million upgrade of facilities will allow the company to re-mine tailings on the 400-hectare site for the next 2 years, by which time it's hoped new leases will be approved and further employment created.
The 28 new jobs will start once the leases are granted and we have access to the sand at Fullerton.
Meanwhile, the operators have been nominated for a Premier's Award for Environmental Excellence for its transformation of a former mining area near Foster.
Bare sand, and there'd been a lot of erosion and a lot of bushfires through there, and it was a pretty ugly spot. Now it's part of the Booty Booty National Park.
The winner will be decided this evening. Brooke Webster, NBN News.
other day, Aurelia Vidmar created early headaches for the tourists. The legacy of last Friday's niggling tactics filtered through to the...
More than anywhere else in the world, the US has always been notorious for its many legal stoushes. Considered a world leader in litigation, it's the only country where every minute of every day 177 lawsuits are filed, meaning you're 3 times more likely to end up in court than in hospital. But alarmingly, Australia isn't far behind, and this is one US trend which is already costing us millions.
Of course, the costs are much increased in terms of the extensive damages which are handed out in courts today. Costs have increased exponentially over the last decades in personal liability cases.
Unfortunately, the cost, in some cases, is a human one. For local councils around the country, even playgrounds are now a legal minefield. And it seems even those fun activities we once took for granted are now coming before the court. Take a youngster who's injured themselves after falling off monkey bars, or someone who's tripped over a crack in the footpath. Both simple acts and now fraught with legal complications.
I find it very difficult to reconcile the fact, and this is a fact, the slippery dip that I played on when I was a child, that my children played on when they were children in a public park, had to be removed because it was considered to be dangerous.
But Newcastle's Lord Mayor John Tate has learnt the hard way. Last year, injury insurance claims totalling more than $10.5 million were made against the council. And across New South Wales, the picture was just as bleak, when the threat of being sued forced the removal of 1/3 of the state's playground equipment from local parks.
Council, be it Newcastle Council or any other council, is an easy target because it has to be available. Councils have to respond to people. Councils have what's known in the legal fraternity as deep pockets, so they're a good mark, and that's unfortunate. And I really think the legal fraternity and insurance companies should take a hard look at what they're doing.
But this is no overnight phenomenon. According to a recent Morgan & Banks survey, a career in law is now Australia's fastest growing profession, and it seems advertisements like these, designed to make people aware of their rights and compensation, aren't slowing down the trend to sue.
No one's ever come up to me and said to criticise me for advertising. Because we don't create cases by advertising. All we do is direct people who may have genuine claims to lawyers who are experts. That's all.
Tomorrow night, we look at why litigation forced the GP of the Year to give up delivering babies. It's easy to see that Dr. Milton Sale's work as a GP obstetrician has been a labour of love. In fact, last year his dedication to healthcare was rewarded when he was named GP of the Year. It was also the year the Adamstown doctor was forced to give up a part of his profession that's seen him safely deliver more than 1,200 babies into the world.
It got to the point where the cost of the premiums were such that it was no longer viable economically to continue doing obstetrics.
But back in 1982, when he was first starting out in his dual role, things were a little different. For one thing, insurance premiums cost him just a few $100s. Over the years, though, a rising number of lawsuits brought against obstetricians for complications at birth or even death has meant a radical change to doctors' insurance policies. Premiums now set him and other GPs in the field back more than $11,000, and that's just in rural areas. So it was little wonder when Dr. Sales and 2 of his colleagues, Newcastle's only remaining GP obstetricians, had no choice but to withdraw their services altogether.
It was a very emotional time to have to come to that decision, and the 3 of us were all upset about it, but particularly seeing we were being forced out and it wasn't a decision based on other reasons.
New South Wales is now only second to New York State as the most litigious place in the world to practice medicine, a fact that's had a detrimental outcome in the world of obstetrics, with 1/3 of the state's specialists no longer delivering babies.
People are finishing their obstetric training and then never delivering a baby again. going into infertility work only or gynecology only, and that's to protect themselves from the litigation aspects of obstetrics.
For Milton Sales, the human cost has had the most devastating effect, a problem he says can only be rectified by forcing the government to rethink its present legislation.
I think that's the only answer really, but it will require legislative change to actually make a difference. Once that's happened, and there could be some cap put on the amount of payouts, some predictability to payouts, so that the insurance funds can then plan in a correct manner, then I think there'll be a turnaround in the trend.
The current trend has seen payouts up to $7 million awarded, the majority of cases relating to children born with cerebral palsy. It seems ironic in a climate when there's never been a safer time to have a child that people are suing more and more. And for obstetricians, the legal threat can hang over their heads for decades. The current statute of limitations allows a child to sue their doctor for any complications at birth right up until the age of 24. Tomorrow night, we take a look at why our legal system saw Silverchair lead singer Daniel Johns forced to defend accusations in court that he assaulted a girl he didn't even know. Silverchair lead singer Daniel Johns is living proof of just how easily AVO legislation can be abused. In January last year, the Novocastrian found himself in a court battle with 26-year-old Emily Spencer in his hometown of Newcastle, the law student alleging the musician threatened her with a gun. A perfectly legitimate case which may in fact wind up in court, but the problem is Johns wasn't even in the country at the time the allegations were made. The incident highlighted how easy it's become to take out apprehended violence orders, a discretion once reserved for a chamber magistrate and the police.
In more recent times, that discretion has been removed, so that no matter how frivolous or silly the complaint might be, the complaint still had to be issued and be dealt with by the court.
And when it comes to frivolous cases, it seems there are no end of examples. In one case, two disputing neighbours went to court over an alleged breach of an AVO because one poked his tongue out at the other. But Newcastle solicitor Carl Boyd is just one legal practitioner who, in the wake of the Silverchair case, called for a review of the current legislation. In May this year, some of the discretion was handed back to magistrates and a clearer distinction between domestic violence orders and apprehended violence orders was put in place. It's hardly a surprising outcome when you consider that since AVO legislation was introduced in 1987, the number of cases have risen exponentially from 1,400 to a whopping 40,000 cases a year taken out in New South Wales courts alone.
The problem is, of course, deciding how you tilt the balance between people who do have a genuine fear for their own protection and their own safety, and those who say, well, I've done nothing wrong, why should I be bound by any order at all?
In the Silverchair case, the matter was resolved fairly quickly when Spencer admitted her claim had no basis and apologised to the courts for having wasted their time. She was ordered to pay costs. But the outcome isn't always so clear-cut. When it comes to domestic violence, there is still evidence to suggest that AVOs are widely underreported and that in more than 85% of cases where it is reported, the abuse has been experienced over a long time. Of course, in some cases, there are deadly consequences when AVOs are not treated seriously. In the state of Victoria each year, up to 40 women and children are killed as a result of ongoing violence.
Civil libertarians would say, well, we should have the continuation of the presumption of innocence. Until there's real proof against a person, they should be free to go about their business as they see fit. Other people say a person who wants protection, is entitled to protection, should be able to ask for no questions asked. That's a rather extreme view on both sides, but that's the balance that the courts and the law have to try and take.
Tomorrow night, in the final part of our legal series, we look at the big business of law. When it comes to litigation, Australia is a close second to the US, a country notorious for its countless lawsuits. And with ads like these promoting large payouts for personal injury claims, it's a course of action more people could be likely to take. But that's a statement that doesn't sit well with Tom Goodcamp.
I don't think litigation's increasing at all. There have been changes to the court rules to make it much more difficult to litigate. There have been changes to the Motor Accidents Act, where you can't commence court proceedings at all unless you have a certificate from the Motor Accidents Authority. So I think litigation is on the decrease, not on the increase.
In fact, the face of Stacks the law firm, Mr Goodcamp, says he can't understand what's wrong with a bit of promotion.
Well, I'm trying to run a business, and obviously you advertise to attract business, and that's why lawyers advertise.
Goodcamp says he's only advocating people's rights. Others say he's encouraging a path that's pervaded every aspect of our life. It's why councils have to deal with thousands of injury claims as frivolous as tripping over footpaths, why university students can sue their lecturers for failing an exam, and why more and more doctors are refusing to practice medicine. All examples of how law has influenced our beliefs.
I wonder whether the change in the legislation allowing lawyers to advertise, I mean you see it on the television all the time now, and that push with a promise of no outlay to start with, I'm sure that drives some people towards the legal route, where really probably the best thing would be to have a conference with the people concerned if they're unhappy with outcomes, and try and resolve the issues in a personal sense rather than through the court.
Of course, others say accepting more accountability for our actions may stop some lawsuits from occurring at all.
Because it seems to me that people only have to give the flimsiest of reason and they're absolved of responsibility, and the responsibility then falls on the shoulders of somebody like a council or a corporation or a government department or some other individual. Now, there is obviously a need for each of us in the community to understand that we're responsible for our actions. And if I walk out in front of a bus, it's my fault. You can't blame the bus driver.
But walking along the beach isn't even what it used to be. With signs warning people it's an exercise they have to undertake at their own risk. Signs that would never have been put up in the first place if legal action wasn't brought against companies. Signs that now pollute an otherwise picturesque scene.
The more people feel that they can go to court if they have a problem, or the more people feel that they can go to court if they fail in respect of their own performance, or if they fail to take due care, the more people will not take responsibility for their own actions, and we'll begin to live in a society where everyone will want to transfer responsibility.
Helen Kapelos, NBN News.
Kevin Naismith and Danny Wasley were friends for 25 years, but now Naismith is accused of killing his mate and shooting another man in the head. Today in Newcastle, he told the court it wasn't him. He admitted lying to family and friends, saying he knew nothing about the disappearance of Wasley and the other victim, Mark Banks, even though he took part in burning and burying their bodies at Stockton Beach. He says he fought with Danny Wasley in the garage that day, but didn't kill him. He says Wasley said he had to kill Banks over a drug deal and that he was trying to stop him. When he went inside, his evidence is that a man came, found Banks, shot him and then threatened to do the same to Naismith's family. In the garage, he found a witness, whose name has been suppressed, standing over Wasley's body. Naismith says he first thought the gunman had killed him, but once he was arrested, it dawned on him that the witness who is now giving evidence against him was involved. It was not until I was in custody that I thought, "You idiot, he's obviously killed Danny Wasley," he said from the stand. The case is due to be summed up tomorrow.
Susan Stewart says the violent attack on her and her husband John Stewart while they lay sleeping at their Lochinvar home lasted 1 minute at the most. But almost 3 years on, she still recalls the incident which left her hospitalised with severe injuries as a terrifying ordeal. Taking the stand at the trial of her husband's former business partner at the Equestrian Centre, Lionel Desange, who's pleaded not guilty to conspiracy to murder, Mrs Stewart said she was woken by 3 figures at midnight on the 19th of December 97 who came into the room. She said one of them was trying to put something over my head and put an electrical cable tie around my neck and pulled it tight. I felt a knife. I felt something sharp on my legs. At that time, she noticed her husband John, who was lying on the floor bleeding after his windpipe was severed in the knife attack. She says Mr Stewart told their third business partner, Heath Ryan, who arrived soon after, Lionel did this. Ryan also took the stand today, the prominent equestrian admitting there were difficulties in the business partnership between him, John Stewart and Lionel Desange, and that soon after John Stewart took over the finances, there was an overdraft. He said to this day it is become apparent to him that the directors' differences could have been a strength if we'd learnt to mould them and achieve what we set out to. The trial continues tomorrow. Helen Kapalos, NBN News.
From the thump and bump of rugby league to the bash and crash of speedway. Only a day before heading off to England with the rest of the Kangaroos, Adam McDougall will take part in the most unconventional World Cup warm-up ever, driving several laps around the Tomago circuit.
Yeah, well, they've assured me that's pretty safe, so I trust these guys.
Today, the Knights winger got his eye in on the Speedway car park, finding the limits of the throttle and the tricky gearbox. Bernie Roberts owns the V8 Super Sedan and has to race it on the same night that he's lending it to a man called Mad Dog.
He'll be right though. He's in a good car, so he'll have no trouble adapting to it, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of fun.
McDougall, however, isn't planning a permanent career move from the backs to the front row. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
Professor John Forbes from Newcastle's Mater Hospital is excited. Worldwide research shows the number of deaths from breast cancer has been falling steadily for the last decade. The result is the consequence of 20 years' research.
There were less deaths in breast cancer in 1990 because there were better treatments in 1980. And that means that there's more good news to come. Screening is probably just starting to have an impact. That didn't start till around 1990. And there are much better treatments in 2000.
He says it's been possible because of the number of women taking part in clinical trials. A project was launched today that will encourage more women to join trials of new treatments, spurred on by women who've already taken part.
It is a new initiative. It hasn't been done like this anywhere in the world. And we're absolutely delighted that it's been funded by Avon, who have come to the party with a massive grant of $500,000 for this national program.
Thousands of lives are now being saved each year throughout the world, but the professor says his work is far from over.
Really do want a world without breast cancer, and I think what we're seeing with treatment, I would predict we will see with prevention during this coming decade, and those two together will convince me that we're really getting on top of it. But while anyone's still getting breast cancer or not surviving it, we've still got more to do.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It seems strange to some that the Zone Crown Country Rugby champions this year would be stripped of its development officer, considering it lost the wildfires only last year.
It does to me and you. Obviously the powers that be don't think that way.
Effectively, just over a third of the New South Wales rugby staff lost their jobs, including Newcastle-based Nathan Croft. He was told the news on Wednesday, a day before his 25th birthday.
Big shocks. Everybody knew something was going on, but nobody knew what was going to happen and nobody knew who was going to go.
The ARU, which just won a $20 million sponsorship, was forced to make the cuts after bailing the state union out of a $5.5 million debt. The Newcastle Hunter region will now most likely be amalgamated with at least one other region which still has an officer employed. The Australian Downhill Mountain Bike Championships will be raced at Mount Sugarloaf on Sunday. Some competitors checked out the course today, while official practice is tomorrow. And the new WNBL side, the Sydney Panthers, which now boasts 3 Hunter players, won't arrive until just before tip-off tonight in their trial match against Canberra tonight on the Central Coast.